Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was in a meeting last night. They designated one person to be the speaker and everybody else. Maybe that would work better electronically for future meetings. Maybe we can try that. It could, clerk, if you could call the roll, please.
Alderman Strelchuk?
Here.
Alderman Bushy?
Here.
Alderman Meyer is not here yet. Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Garrell?
Here.
Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Schneider?
Here.
Alderman Nurbin?
Here.
And Mayor Wirth?
Here. Well, we certainly have a quorum. The first item is Resolution 3742. We'll convene as the Committee of the Whole to discuss league play and tournament play. I'd like to do this somewhat similar to what we did last time. So to start with, just so if there's a majority of no's, then we might as well, wrap this up early. How many people are not in favor of doing league play based on the information you've seen or heard in the last week? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have 8 people on. So that isn't a majority, and we don't know where Dale is or what he's going to do. Wait a minute. We've got somebody incoming. There we go. Alderman Meyer, welcome.
Thank you. So a little late for the other meeting.
No problem. So we were just starting off with the do we want to have league play at all question, just like last week, and you walked in the middle of a Committee of the Whole 4-4 tie. So if you vote, we go away. If we vote yes, we have a discussion. Of course, we vote again.
I'll vote yes.
Okay, so we will have a discussion. There are, so that is the primary option. If you notice on the Exhibit B that was provided to you, there are 2 primary sections that were added. There's section number 1 and section number 9. Am I missing any, Director Lundin? No, okay. So why don't we start with section number 1 and make sure that we're all, Alderman Boucher.
I'd just like to ask a clarification question. And that is, at the beginning of the Exhibit B, it says these are the user group guidelines. Are they guidelines or are they not guidelines, but enforcements?
Well, they are the rules by which Director Lundin is setting up contracts with the user groups. So they are,
in other words,
and they're the guideline. They don't sign exactly this, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Lundin. These become part of their contract.
We've actually asked them to do 2 things. We've asked them to sign a copy of the resolution or exhibit in acknowledgement of all of the guidelines. And then obviously those that have to have a COVID response plan would have to provide that as well.
So, does that answer your question?
yes.
Okay. So back to paragraph number 1. Paragraph number 1, I believe, was anticipated, even if we would not have approved tournaments, to still include paragraph number 1 generally. Director Lundin, do you want to explain the purpose, please?
Yes. After last week's meeting, as we started to distribute the documents to user groups, several of the user groups started to question whether or not some of what they considered to be regular league play would be defined as a tournament. And since there was no definition of league play, to contrast that with a tournament, we thought it prudent to at least define league play so that whether or not council decides to allow tournament play, the user groups at least understand what is allowed under league.
What this added is your normal one-on-one games, but it also allows round robin events, which may have 4 teams where 2 teams play each other, and then the winners and losers play each other, which would, again, jump in if I'm wrong. I'm
Nope,
just
you're
trying
correct.
to. So this would allow would clarify that that's part of league play. That's not a tournament, and that's what leagues typically have in their season. And this year, since the season may be slightly shortened, because some of these leagues would have started long before we issued proclamation number 5, or at least somewhat before, they may make up for it with some round robins. Does anybody have any questions about paragraph number 1? Alderman Schneider.
So is it not possible because of the number of teams within Mequon to play something like a round robin with Mequon residents? Because it says 25% of the team, one of the teams has to be mostly Mequon Thiensville members. So I'm just trying to figure what the difference is between having 3 other teams come into Mequon and play a round robin as opposed to having a tournament. A tournament means there's multiple of these round robin tournaments going on simultaneously.
So to answer your first question, correct. There is not typically enough teams of each individual age group to allow them just to play each other as resident teams or as teams made up majority of Mequon Thiensville residents. It also, just to note, what they call round robins have been already a part of their typical league play. We're just trying to provide for that. And obviously in that situation, there may be circumstances where only one of the 4 teams played are the resident user group team. And that's why when we then went to the paragraph with respect to tournaments, to try to be consistent, if you're going to consider having a residency requirement, that's where the 25% came.
Let me add one other thing, if I might, since we've had lots of discussions about this. And I think Mr. Jones explained this a little bit in our last meeting. For many of our leagues, we only have 1 or 2 or 3 teams in Mequon. So our select leagues for baseball, for example, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Jones or Ms. Lundeen or anybody. Some of our select leagues, the players that may be a little higher in the food chain or aren't just casual players but are a little more serious, their season is almost entirely playing teams from outside of Mequon, other than playing the 1, I think it's typically 1, but maybe 1 or 2 other leagues besides their own. So they're the select group out of Timba or what have you, and they go and they don't play other Mequon kids. It isn't Little League, which many of us remember, where whatever community you lived in had 20 teams of 12 kids, and you played each other all summer. This is, a lot of our teams are playing people from Cedarburg and Grafton and Menominee Falls and wherever they come from. Is that correct, Mr. Jones? I see you nodding your head. That's a yes?
Yes, that is correct.
So if we were going to make a residency requirement, we would, if it was a majority Mequon Thiensville kids, we would be shutting down league play for a bunch of our leagues. Now we have, as you may have seen it in an email that was sent to all of us, there was at least one partial truth in it, and that is that there are 2 primary little leagues in Mequon, one of which has already decided, irrespective of what we decided, and they made that quite clear in an email today, not to cancel their season because they didn't have enough participation, they didn't have enough people, and based on their own rules, they didn't have enough. They thought it would be too difficult to administer with the number of kids, and so we I think, have one other little league, boys little league anyhow. And then there's some softball. I mean, this isn't just baseball that we're talking about, but as an example. So that's the difference between most league play and tournaments. But also to make it clear that if we're, the league play we're allowing does have a team or two, on a weekend coming into Mequon and our kids going to their communities. So anybody have any changes to number 1 or other questions? So I'm raise your hand if number 1 is fine. Okay, I think that's a majority. I'm not sure if I saw Alderman Gerald's arm or not, but he didn't. You opposed to number 1? Oh, there we go. Now the heart of what we're here to talk about tonight is section 9. And I'm gonna to move it along a little bit, point out this was a set of suggestions that Mr. Geese and Dean came up with, and talking to other people and talking in their understanding of how tournament play works, and hearing from people who are interested. But clearly you have the ability to pick and choose among them. And also, I believe there are 2 or 3 amendments that people, aldermen want to offer this evening that were sent out. I think 3. Oh, at one point it was 4. I think it's now down to 3, but it could maybe be clarified. So besides those amendments, I didn't see other amendments, but we could walk through. Paragraph A, the residency, Alderman Boucher.
Okay, I have a question that's on B, so when you get to B, I'll ask it.
Okay, I'm going to walk through it so we don't jump around, if that's okay. If anybody has and if you submitted, Alderman Boucher and Alderman Nurbin submitted some amendments, when we get to whatever letters you have where your amendments go, jump in because I may miss them. Section A. Does anybody have a problem with the 25% residency requirement? And Mr. Jones, if you jump in, or maybe Ms. Geese or Mr. Geese or Ms. Lundeen, is that workable for most of our tournaments? That's my question for you. That's a question before Alderman Strelchuk will get to your question.
I think that there are a number of tournaments that under normal operations would not meet that requirement, but I do think that all leagues and all groups, frankly, are rethinking how this season works. So there will be some that will be happy for the opportunity to still host tournaments and modify their operations to fit it. And then there will be some that won't, either because of the residency or because of others. And then they'll have to make the decision of how to proceed.
Okay.
I would just add that in some respects, this will allow for tournaments of a size greater than the 4-team round robin that we just talked about. But undoubtedly, this will serve to limit the number of teams that can come in within any one age bracket. Because of the earlier point, there are only so many teams within Mequon and Thiensville that could comprise that 25% threshold.
And I would add that originally as drafted, this said that they needed to be comprised primarily of Mequon Thiensville residents because that was something we said last week. But after further discussion, it got changed to 25% because we recognized that there wouldn't be any tournaments or other than Little League tournaments in Mequon. And again, please jump in if I'm wrong, any staff person. So that's A. And I guess the question is, how many people want to have the 25% threshold if we're going to have tournaments? Raise your hand. If we're going to have them, that will limit kids to some degree. Anybody have any issues with paragraph B? Alderman Boucher, I'm sorry, Alderman Strelchuk, you had your hand up on A?
Yeah, I just think the intent on A was just that we want to establish that, there's at least 25% of a home team of some sort. Somebody that's actively been using the parks and would continue using the parks as the home park or the home team. So
Right.
I don't know if we need to state that any differently, but I think it's fine as written.
Okay. A couple of our big tournaments, which might have 20 or 30 teams, this doesn't work for. I mean, just so everybody's clear when they vote on it. The no more than 2 parks on the same day. Alderman Boucher, you wanted to comment on B?
I'm not sure where that came from, because I don't think that was last week's discussion. So I'm kind of curious if it's for social distancing purposes, what difference does it make if they're at 3 parks?
It was not for social distancing purposes. It was more for crowd control and the allowance of more tournaments. If we have a single tournament that encompasses all of the parks, that obviously limits the number of tournaments that would otherwise be provided in a already shortened season. But it's there as an option, obviously.
So mix B and C together, you would end up with at most 3 diamonds, correct?
Correct, Mike, right?
Right, yep.
Discussion about paragraph B by anyone? Alderman Strelchak?
We're still including soccer in this, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
I'm just,
We're
I'm just-
primarily focused on baseball. I just want to make sure that we're talking about both sports that came forward and asked for consideration.
Yes, this would apply to all user group rentals of fields.
how many people are in favor of B? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a majority. Paragraph. And remember, if you had because I don't remember where the proposed amendments would fit in. Paragraph C, we did talk about this last week. The number of fields that could be used at the same time in each of the 4 parks that have playing fields. Any questions or comments regarding that? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. D, the minimum time between games. It's to an hour between the end of one game and the beginning of the next. I believe there was an amendment offered to say the scheduled time. Alderman Boucher, is that your amendment?
That was my amendment because practicality, you don't know exactly when a game is going to end. So I would assume that, if you're going to start another game at say 3 o'clock, you can't then tell people that show up, oh, sorry, the game went until 2:15. You have to come back in another 15 minutes. I would just makes more sense scheduled games.
I would clarify though that it was intended then to limit game times so that there would be the hour in between. So then those teams would either play with a inning limit or a time limit. Doesn't mean it can't be changed. It just was done intentionally that way.
I think you'll end up with more loitering if you say, whenever we're done, you got to wait an hour, because then you're going to have people getting there early and they can't set the time. I think I think Alderman Boucher's got a point. If you want.
No, I more meant the original game would be limited. So in other words, if they're scheduling games every 3 hours, then obviously the first game could only take 2, and then they'd have to end it for there to be an hour between games.
Can you play baseball that way in real life?
Sure, there are league rules that after a certain time you can't start another inning.
In select baseball?
Yep.
I understand that at night, okay. But it doesn't say that though, does it? It doesn't say that you need to limit it. It simply says you got to start the next one an hour later, which if I were reading this as a user, I would say, well, geez, my game starts at 2. Baseball game takes 2 hours, and so everybody, the next team should be here at 5. And they
Well,
show up
that's
at,
where,
and then we go, oh, wait a minute, we gotta wait, because it doesn't say, does it, that,
well,
Uh,
the proposed language was trying to explain, and so says, in an attempt to control crowds associated primarily with loitering, there shall be a minimum of 1 hour between the end of one game and the beginning of the next game. So the first part was trying to clarify the intent to show what it is, but I'd be happy to add language that further clarifies that the intent is to also limit the timing of the first game.
the preference of the council. Alderman Boucher has an amendment, Alderman Strelchak.
I support Alderman Boucher's amendment. If you want to say something, no greater than or no less than 45 minutes, just to give an earlier game an opportunity to go over and clear the field. I'm comfortable with that. But I do like, I agree with Kristen, because I like to keep them on a schedule. But the kids are there to play. They're going to be there to play regardless. If there's 2 or 3 games, we just don't want them running that third game running an hour late, and then you've got crowd control on a third game.
Well, but you're gonna have that with Alderman Boucher's proposal. If the first game runs an hour late, and there's supposed to be an hour in its space, the second game can start an hour after the first one was scheduled to end. You're gonna have all 4 teams there under Alderman Boucher's proposal.
I think you'll have it there for both.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Yeah.
Or a proposal and a second. How many are in favor of that amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4. That fails. I think that leagues can schedule times. But I do think we need to clarify the language to have it say that we can add Alderman Boucher's language as long as there's a requirement that they end the first game within 15 minutes of the scheduled time. If we had put those 2 together, then you're getting somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour between them. Would that work, people? That sounds like a majority. Tournament staffing. I know Alderman Nurbin had a recommendation for this language. Alderman Nurbin.
Yeah, my recommendation was primarily that if they're using multiple sites, that while they have one person in charge overall for the tournament, they would need some subordinate person in charge at the site that the primary person was not at. I think the intent of this is to make sure there's someone that is responsible looking over the protocols that we're outlining in the Exhibit B, but if that person's at Ranke Field, they can't also be at River Barn Park or Lemke Park, as the case may be. So just to ensure that there's one person at every site that is doing that function, while they may not be the person in charge, they are the person in charge at that location.
Director Lundin or Mr. Geese, any comments?
I would agree with that. I mean, I think having kind of a point person at each site is probably appropriate.
Okay, so
I agree. I think our intent was just so that both parks and the police department would have one primary person to contact if there's an issue. But
Right.
certainly being able to have people at multiple sites makes sense.
okay. Was there another amendment to this? I thought Alderman Boucher had 2 amendments. Was that to this?
It was actually back to 6, but it's Alderman Urban and I actually had amendments, I think, that ended up having opposite intents, if I'm correct. because mine went back to 6 to define for contact tracing attendees, and the definition of attendees being the people who are participating in the game, not those who are watching the game. Whereas I believe in Alderman Nurbin's amendment, he had language in there to the effect of a code of conduct signature by spectators. So I think we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Alderman Nurbin, that we have opposites here, I believe.
Well, that's okay. We can discuss them both. Alderman Nervous?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, just to clarify my proposed amendment, I personally am in favor of contacts, being able to contact trace everyone that attends, not just the kids participating. But you're going to have adults mingling. That's just as important to keep track of if there's a case that's identified as it is for the kids. But mine went a step further, and I've received a couple of comments from people concerned about perhaps some of the conduct of the spectators. I know some of these youth sports things get pretty heated. There's already codes of conduct with the manner in which people treat the officials, or other types of language that's used by spectators, and parents already sign those kinds of codes of conduct. Mine was just to make sure that the attendees are aware of the requirements in Exhibit B and say they're going to abide by them, and the guidance given by the person that's designated to be in charge of the event. Hopefully to ward off anyone having an adverse reaction to being told to do one thing or another, like be socially distant, or maybe if you're in a situation where you're close to others, if someone tells them to wear a mask, I don't want someone to say, you don't have the right to tell me, because we're requiring this of people to follow this protocol, and we're putting someone in charge for enforcing it. I just don't want it to be a situation where someone is trying to tell someone the right thing to do, and then they get a reaction that, you know, they're not going to comply, and or maybe it gets heated or confrontational. We're bending over backwards to try and create a construct here where we can have this type of activity, but it's key that everyone participates in following the protocols in here, or it's not going to really work well. And I thought just making everyone acknowledge that, hey, there are some requirements we're asking of you, and there's a person at each site that's charged with enforcing that. If they tell you to do something, you should listen to them, and if you are warned and fail to comply, you can be removed. I hope that never comes up, but I think it's likely to occur at least once or twice along the way.
I'm a little concerned about us requiring them to get permission slips for everybody who comes to the game. Practically, I don't know how we would police that. But also, isn't that really their job to figure out how they comply? And I'll tell you, I've gone to a few of these games with a nephew of mine who played select baseball for a couple of years. I mean, this isn't like they take tickets. People show up, they come, they go, they leave. You walk up, you watch 2 innings. That way you can tell your nephew you were there, and then you go do whatever you were going to do. And so I do question how, even the contact tracing. I have some empathy for Alderman Boucher's argument that it's the participants and the coaches, because I'm not sure how you'd ever manage that with spectators. Just as a practical matter, I don't know how you do it. And let's not make rules that we can't.
Mike has gotten some feedback that those that played this weekend, that was difficult, and they were concerned because they tried to take it at the beginning of the game, and then as people arrive during the game, they're concerned about how to flag people down. We kind of viewed it as their best effort to otherwise capture everyone that they could.
But if you have a kid there and you know who all the kids and all the coaches are, and you had an outbreak, can't you go to each one of, you're going to go to them anyhow and say, who came to watch you?
Well, and I think that was the intent of what they did originally, that they tried to capture all of those that were there, and obviously the late rivals who may or may not be able to be caught, that then if there was a case and the contact tracing was otherwise in place, that they would get to those latecomers to notify them as well.
Alderman Schneider, you were both laughing at me because I probably said something dumb.
No, I wasn't laughing at you. I was just laughing at the difficulty of this situation, which seems daunting because the children are probably the least likely to show symptoms, even if they're COVID infected. So I don't think just looking at the children is going to get us very far. But I have to acknowledge the fact that trying to have everyone that comes to a game and wanders between different fields looking at different kids to have them all sign up and we would have to pretty much throw up our hands and say, yeah, this isn't probably going to be possible to be very specific if there's an outbreak. Because how are you going to find the person that came for 2 innings to watch their nephew? You know, it's just the kind of setting that is the reason it is rated the highest risk for the CDC. It's the kind of setting where people don't stay where you plant them. It's not like, you know, people, children particularly, but adults also are likely to go check out some other area of activity. And I don't know that it's possible for us, honestly, to regulate it to the point that you would think.
And if we can't, then the question is, should we? I saw Alderman Meyer and Alderman Boucher. I don't know who was first. Alderman Boucher?
Oh, I was just going to look at from the perspective, first of all, aren't we going to be posting signs regarding social distancing and stuff in all the parks and playgrounds?
There already are
So-
some. We'll be putting up permanent signs.
So I kind of look at it that sometimes when you go, you know, you're installing some software and you're going to, you know, click the button, all instructions. If you don't want to install it, then you're saying, no, I don't want to follow it. So basically, if somebody, you know, has the rules, that they are assuming they're held accountable to those rules. So if somebody does call and complain that somebody is being, you know, overboard, like Alderman Urban is saying, then they've implicitly agreed to those and they are in the wrong. So I'm just, and then, yeah, the practicality of keeping track of it. And I don't know, it seems like it's something that the league should decide how they're going to handle that.
Alderman Strelchek.
I'm kind of in favor of leaving it as it's written. I think if you try to go to crowd registration, it's just going to be too difficult. Furthermore, item 7, I'd like to offer just a slight amendment on there. We have a limit or eliminate. I would recommend removal of the word limit or just, we're instructing them to update their guidelines. And I think as a city, we're instructing them to eliminate their guidelines for handshakes and high fives. We all know that they're going to happen on occasion, but if we just say, you know, limit, so the coaches don't shake, or that's limiting it. I think it just sends the message that they should do it, and they should be in charge of policing it to their best ability possible.
Okay, we're jumping between amendments, but this one looks easier. How many people are in favor of removing the words limit or? Looks like a majority. Any problem with that, Director Lundin or Mr. Geese?
I guess I do have some concerns because we only specified a couple that would be eliminated, like the handshakes and things like that. But we are asking them to potentially consider rule amendments to limit contact that would be sports specific.
What do you mean by limit as opposed to eliminate?
Well, there are the leagues themselves are considering regulations, and again, this is intended to try and capture all sports, so that's dependent, but that are putting in, for example, smaller group practices. So rather than having the entire group together, that they're limiting the number of children that would be in contact or limiting the number of drills that are otherwise conducted. So that's where the limit came through, was not with respect to handshakes, hugging, and those that were specified, but as these sports go, other points of contact that they may be able to limit through their own league regulations.
You're talking about game contact? I'm not sure what other,
Sure, game contact, or again, this is coming across, all sports. So if they need rule modifications to be able to accommodate.
okay,
Such as football.
right, game contact. You don't need to slap each other in the butt, but you do need to tackle. If we want to take out the limit or, should we say eliminate contact such as handshakes, high fives, hugging? Because you're not going to eliminate game contact in any sport. You're not going to eliminate tagging people out. You're not going to eliminate checks. You're not going to eliminate tackling. Alderman Strelchak.
You could add and limit sporting contact where reasonable, and then just, if it's not reasonable, it's not reasonable. Somebody's sliding into home base and you need to tag them out, you need to tag them out. I mean, it's not reasonable.
I just don't know how you limit other game contact. Alderman Sejak, excuse me, Mr. Sejak.
I think that the trick here might be just that it's probably two concepts, at least as I heard Kristen describe it, that are combined within the same paragraph. I think you have the concern about physical contact within the sport itself, but then you have let's try to just limit contact in the sense of the number of folks that we're bringing together. And I think that was kind of the goal there, as I heard Ms. Lundeen describe it, was to do things like, in practices, keep groups separated a little bit more than you might otherwise. Your outfielders practice over here, your infielders practice over here, and they never intermingle, that type of thing.
But it doesn't matter at all. It's talking about contact, not how close you are together. It's talking about contact. That's not contact, is it? We're drafting on the fly, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of contact tracing, that type of contact. I think we're talking about two different types of contact is the trouble.
I think,
but maybe I'm wrong.
I think there's contact. I think there's the high five junk, and now you're talking about keeping people some sort of physical separation. So yeah, maybe. Now I'm very confused. I thought we went over this. Suggestions, staff suggestions. Alderman Giro had his hand up.
Yeah, I think we are, when we just say we asked to be limited or limit the handshakes and hugs and stuff. That was just fine. I mean, it's just fine. People know what to do. I mean, they've got it ingrained in their head. They've been going through this now for a couple of months. I mean, a chunk of this COVID thing is behind us. So I think we had it. I think we had it pretty well done. Just limited. Just ask them to limit it. Limited contact, and they're reasonable. They'll figure it out.
Mr. Geese.
And talking to some of the groups, especially groups like North Shore United, they're already going to be limited in their bylaws that they're creating, and adjusting kind of practice accordingly so that they're limiting contact. And that's something that, I mean, I think we could potentially just say eliminate contact. And in some of these aspects, such as soccer, they're going to go to smaller groups, where I talked to Shannon Smith from North Shore United today, where they're going to have smaller groups of 7 to 10 that potentially would be more contact, practices that I think they're going to kind of police that on their own.
All right, Alderman Meyer.
What about just putting putting aside just an idea. Eliminate handshakes, high fives, huggings, etc. Limit all other contact except which is necessary to perform sporting activity.
Writing that down. So we can move on. Any, Director Lundin, do you have any concerns with that, or Mr. Geese? Since you guys have had contact with okay, how many people are in favor of that? Let's move on. We got to go back to, since somebody brought up the contact tracing and the issue of attendees or participants and coaches or everybody in the world. Mr. Jones.
I think the council has hit the ball out of the park with respect to the guidelines currently contained in Exhibit B. So pardon the weak sports analogy, but we are requiring an acknowledgement from each of the user groups that needs to be signed. They need to have a COVID-19 response plan. Everyone needs to commit to social distancing, and we are going to be performing contact tracing. We just talked about eliminating contact. We're going to be limiting the size of groups and teams that can play on our fields. And we're also encouraging all of our user groups to review the educational materials contained in Exhibit B. Sometimes less is more. I think we've got plenty here. And if we saddle Mr. Geese up with a whole lot of requirements to chase down this summer, paperwork and otherwise, we're not going to get anything else done in our parks. So I would respect.
But in 6 would be to lessen the requirement.
I'm sorry?
What we're talking about in 6 would be to lessen the requirement, not increase it. Right now it's Section 6, it says all attendees that you got to do contract tracing. Alderman Bucci suggested to change that to participants, which I assume also includes coaches and so forth.
Oh, I apologize. I thought we were talking about having each spectator sign an acknowledgement form. My regrets.
That's what it may actually say right now, and I think that's Alderman Bucci's concern. How many people are in favor of changing attendees to participants and coaches and adult leaders? And that's coaches and adult leaders. Now, since we left the confines of Section 9, which is what I thought we were here to talk about, and we got all the way to E, we did say that they should have a site manager, and I think everybody agreed to that. Is there any other change to paragraph E? Any other comments? Let me summarize what we've done by hand vote. We're going to change in Section 6 attendees to participants, coaches, and adult leaders. We're going to add the changes on the contact on Section 7 to eliminate contact such as handshakes, high fives, etc., hugging, etc., and limit other contact except as necessary for sporting activities. In the next page on D, we're going to make it clear that they need to schedule their games, that there needs to be an hour break between the end of the scheduled first time and the scheduled second time, and they can't deviate from the scheduled end time by more than 15 minutes. And so they can they could have those 4 hour long and have plenty of time, or they can make it short. That's up to them. And then tournament staffing to add somebody who's responsible at each location they're at. That's what we've got in front of us. Any other changes? Is there a motion to recommend this to the council? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Anyone else? I think there were, I think that's a 7-2 vote. Alderman Strelchak?
Just a quick question on point of order on item 9. There's two conflicting statements in parentheses where we've stricken out what the first section, right?
Yeah, we had.
I just wanted to make sure that we're,
I'm sorry, I should have said that, but that was quite clearly where we went with that. So,
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to point of order, just talk about it.
so we have a recommendation to the council. Alderman Parrish?
I just want to clarify my vote is actually a no.
Okay. You want to take a roll call, Madam Clerk?
Alderman Strelchak,
Aye.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrell,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
No.
Alderman Schneider,
No.
Alderman Nurbin,
Aye.
Mayor Worth.
No. But that's recommended to the council. We will come together as the council. Do we have a motion to approve the changes that we just made to Exhibit B and the resolution that's before us?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
We have a motion and lots of seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The
No.
ayes have. Oh, we get, but the ayes still have it. I don't believe there's anything else. Oh, there was just a brief economic impact presentation that was in your packet. Does anybody want Ms. Krieger to answer any questions or to go over it, or is it fairly self-explanatory? Alderman Strelchak.
It is. Are you sure you can hire somebody at $10 an hour to clean bathrooms, COVID?
They clean it big, not clean it, but otherwise, we have at least one willing to come back. So we could, and I think summer help is options are at a premium. So I think we're fairly certain that we can.
Alderman Strelchak, there we go.
What's that?
Ms. Lundin? Oh, no, it's still going. I thought maybe it was you. I'm wrong. That was a little hard to hear. Could other people hear it?
Yes, we are
Yeah.
confident.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Krieger on the analysis? Obviously, that's a high-end analysis. It should be less than what's anticipated there. Anything else? Alderman Garrell, do you have a motion?
Yeah, move to adjourn.
You want to do that, you have to be faster. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
See you, everybody.
This conference is no longer being recorded.